It's good to see you. It's good to hear you. Hope you're all doing well and keeping safe wherever you are. Let me share my screen. Oh, Liz, can you make me host so I can share my screen? Thank you. So, as you know, we are now in an introductory course to Reconstructionism, to the movement known today as Reconstructing Judaism. I find it very exciting that we are doing this. I find it very exciting that I am teaching this because I'm probably the one with the least experience within the Reconstructionist movement from everyone in this meeting group today. Reconstructionist Judaism is namely a branch of Judaism which practically does not exist in Europe. The first Reconstructionist community in Germany, where I'm from, was established last year. And, wow. And all the other branches of Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, Reform Judaism, Conservative Judaism, originate from Europe, originate from countries which are today either in Germany or in Poland. But not Reconstructionist Judaism. Reconstructionist Judaism, as we will learn today, and as you might already know, is actually an American Jewish movement. But as I believe, many of the teachings of Reconstructionism are easily compatible with other non-American realities, but we will now focus on the American part of the story because, of course, we are an American congregation. Before we would start the lesson, I found a nice video clip by our movement. I wanted to start with this video clip that provides a very broad overview of what Reconstructionist Judaism is. And then we will have a look at the schedule of the different sessions. And then I will try to summarize what Reconstructionism is today and what it was yesterday and what it will be tomorrow. Let's see. And please let me know if you cannot hear the sound. I have never done this before. I've never shared a video clip before.
Reconstructionist Judaism has a long history.
Unfortunately, sound's not coming through, but I know how to fix it. So pause the video.
Okay.
Click New Share.
New Share. Where is that?
At the top.
At the top.
Or cancel your share.
Oh, stop share.
Yes, you can stop. Now, when you share again, the bottom left corner of the little tab has Share Computer Sound.
Oh, wow. Bottom left corner.
So click Share Screen. You get a pop-up with all your windows.
Ah, okay. I see it now. Thanks. Wait. It's my best.
Reconstructionist Judaism has a long history of turning dreams into realities. There was a time when Jewish girls didn't have bat mitzvahs, and we changed that. We champion women, LGBTQ, and racially diverse rabbis and leaders, and we lead the movement to create authentic communities and to make diversity a part of our DNA. Our dream of equality and inclusion is now our reality, and we're not done yet. Our dreams for the Jewish future are even bigger. We dream for our leaders, Reconstructionist rabbis who shape the next incarnation of American Jewish life through spirituality, tradition, and entrepreneurial innovation. What if being a rabbi meant using technology and a startup mentality to open paths into meaningful Jewish life, so that our traditions continue to thrive? In a world where human connection is ever evolving, we dream for our young people. A new generation of Jews yearns for meaning and community more fiercely than ever before. What if we create a caring space where young people can come exactly as they are? A welcoming place without judgment or fear. A spiritual place that nourishes their modern values and their Jewish values. We dream for our communities. An interconnected web of Reconstructionist communities that creates a new story about what Judaism is and can be. What if, working together, our community of communities can bring more justice, love, and peace into the world? The possibilities are endless, but it all begins with a dream. Reconstructionist Judaism continues to turn dreams into realities through our work today. In our rabbinical school, students now combine the rich study of Jewish traditions with deeply practical training, like entrepreneurialism. They emerge not only as rabbis, but as change makers, ready to help 21st century Jews accomplish their own dreams for a better world and a meaningful Jewish life. We build places where Jewish kids get to be themselves and grow themselves. We guide and support young Jewish leaders on campuses across the country. We advise the White House on bringing about positive change through Jewish values. We stand at the forefront of social justice efforts. And we partner with organizations in Israel to promote creative Jewish expression and religious pluralism. The power of our dreams continues to inspire, connecting like-minded individuals and families throughout our congregations, in North America and all over the Jewish world. We've been dreaming for the past 50 years to reconstruct Jewish meaning and to renew Judaism for future generations. With your help, Reconstructionist Judaism will continue to dream, to grow, and to nourish Jewish life. Connect with us. Dare with us. Dream with us.
Good video. I like that.
That's really nice. Yeah. I loved that when I first saw it. It was great.
I'm glad you liked it. I like it too. It's great. It's very cute. But it does not provide a very deep explanation of what Reconstructionist Judaism is. It is a lovely video clip and I love it and I love to play it and I'm glad that you enjoyed it too. But that's not the source of learning which we are going to use today. It's introduction though, and I think it's a great way to start to learn. So, but before we would dive into Reconstructionist Judaism, I just wanted to provide you a brief overview of what's going to happen in the next 10 months. We are today in the first session of a series of adult ed classes on every second Sunday of the month. Rabbi Steve Nathan and I are gonna introduce you to various aspects of Reconstructionist Judaism. As you can see on the screen, today we are having Recon 101 introductory class, where I will try to summarize the 10 units in one unit. And then next week, we will work on the historical context. Why did Reconstructionist Judaism get established in the US and not somewhere else? Who was Mordechai Kaplan? So Mordechai Kaplan. Where did he come from? How did that influence his life and his point of view? And he actually did not want to establish a new movement. We are going to speak about that today shortly. But then his students did establish a new branch of Judaism. Was the role of RRC, the Rabbinical College and the Rabbinical Assembly. So these are some aspects which we are going to deal with next week. Then, as you can see, in the following few sessions, we are going to speak about Reconstructionist Jewish theology. I have heard this critique before, that Reconstructionist Jews are just a bunch of atheist Jews or secular Jews who pretend to be religious. I kind of understand that point of critique, but I think it's not true. And this is something which we are going to discuss in the week after that. And Steve is going to lead that session. What do Reconstructionist Jews believe in, and what's the role of God? How do Reconstructionist theologians understand God? Because there is not one understanding, but several different approaches to that question. Then in the week after that, we are looking at the role of prayer why do Reconstructionist Jews pray, and how do they, or how do we pray, and how do we reconstruct prayer. We will take a look at Ritual Well. That is a portal run by the Reconstructionist Judaism movement. You might be familiar with Ritual Well already. They have great resources for communities, for individuals, to make Jewish ritual and liturgy more meaningful. So that's the topic of the 4th meeting. Then in the meeting afterwards, we are looking at the mitzvot, the commandments. Reconstructionist Jewish theology traditionally rejects the idea that there was a revelation on Mount Sinai and that religious observances are divinely ordained or commanded. I said traditionally because there are also some Reconstructionist Jews who believe that all of that what I just said is true, but that's not what Kaplan wrote, and we are discussing that in a few minutes. So anyway, if we assume that these commandments are not divine, why should we keep them, and how do we keep them, and should we speak of mitzvot, or should we rather speak of folkways, of customs that are practiced by our people? What about ethics? What's the role of Jewish ethics, Jewish values? Are there Jewish ethics at all, or are we just reflecting the ethics of the environment where we live? So these are some of the questions for the 5th session. Then in the month after that, we will look at various practices, how to involve traditionally marginalized communities, in our Jewish space, how to reconstruct Judaism to be more inclusive of feminist approaches, how to make it LGBTQ, queer, inclusive. And Steve is going to lead us in that discussion. Then in the 7th month, we will look at the aspects of belonging, of the Jewish peoplehood. Does it still make sense to speak of a Jewish family in the 21st century when we are all individualistic and modern and all these other whatever, you know what I'm getting at? Does it still make sense to think of ourselves as a tribe, as in a framework of kinship, when we are living in an age of individualistic, capitalistic societies? How do we relate to the idea of Zionism? We are going to speak today a bit about Zionism because, as you will see, that played a very important role in the first years of Reconstructionist Judaism. But how do we relate to Zionism today? The realities of 2020 are not the same as of 1920 when Kaplan developed his Zionistic approach. So how should we relate to that question today? And also not only Zionism as an abstract ideology, but I also want to discuss with you how to relate to the state of Israel. I believe that's also a very relevant discussion we should have. Then in the unit after the 7th class, we will
Armin,
discuss. Yes?
just to interrupt you for a second. In number 7, we actually, as a congregation, watched the movie Chosenness, I think it's called. And I will message you the link to bio on that. And we discussed it. So we have some background
That's great.
I'll share with you so that you know that the community has some background.
Great, thank you so much. Right, so Steve and I talked this through and we developed this together, but that doesn't mean that you should not add your own ideas and insights and that we shouldn't develop the schedule together. I think one of the core values of Reconstructionist Judaism and we will talk about that in a minute, is that we make decisions as a community. And I do believe in that value. So please, if you have any comments or ideas how to develop this schedule, what to add, what to lose, what to abandon, let me know. You can email me. You can also just tell that right now. That's cool with me. Yeah, that's something I wanted to say at the very beginning, by the way. So feel free to unmute anytime. I can speak for an hour or one and a half hours nonstop, but I assume that's not what you want to experience tonight. So if anytime you have something on your mind, if you have questions or concerns, or just want to get rid of something, do that. So feel free to unmute yourself and to make your voice heard. Okay, Unit 8, Racial and Environmental Justice. Yeah, so these are two issues which are obviously not covered in traditional Jewish literature. Race is not a concept that exists in the Torah or the Talmud. It's a modern concept, and environmental justice, it's not a main concern, let's put it that way, for the rabbis. So how do we use traditional sources to build up a counter narrative against racism, against the abuse of the environment? These are also issues which we are going to deal with on the 8th session. And then there are two final sessions led by Steve on Abraham Joshua Heschel and his relationship to Reconstructionism, and also to Kaplan in person. As I understood, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but Steve had a course on Heschel last year or something like that, and he did not manage to finish for whatever reason. So these two last classes are kind of connected to that course too. But he can explain that himself much better than I can. Okay.
Yes, definitely. We decided we really wanted more.
Okay, great. That's a good sign if you wanted more. Okay, are there any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, if not, I will ask you now how long this class should last, because actually neither Steve nor I received an information on the length of this class. So
I would say we aim for an hour with some overflow, and then,
okay.
But usually we should be off the air within an hour and a half.
Okay, that's good to know. So now we are at 1:20, 20-ish. So I will now try to summarize everything in 40 minutes. Again, you are invited to interrupt me, to ask questions, anything. Now, I brought you a brief definition of what Reconstructionist Judaism is. This will be nothing new for you, but before we would start with the history and the development of the movement, I just wanted to have this definition on the screen. So Reconstructionist Judaism is a modern Jewish movement that views Judaism as a progressively evolving civilization. This is a definition which we are going to discuss in a few minutes. As I said before, Reconstructionist Judaism is actually the only major movement, or the first major Jewish movement. Is not the only one, because since then there have been some changes, but the first major Jewish movement that was born in the US. As you know, as I said at the very beginning, Reform, Orthodox, and Conservative Judaism were born in various German states in the 19th century. And Reconstructionist Judaism actually was developed starting in the late 1910s or early 1920s, and then got established as a separate branch in the late 1960s in New York and Philadelphia. So it's a very East Coast phenomenon, at least when it comes to its origins. The first Reconstructionist community was the Society for the Advancement of Judaism, which was established in the early 1920s by Mordechai Kaplan. I can say a few words about Kaplan now, but I will also speak about him in more detail next month. Kaplan was a Lithuanian-born rabbi and scholar and philosopher and sociologist, and an extremely interesting person. I'm a big fan of Kaplan. Actually, that's the reason why I came to study to RSC. I've always been a big fan of his, even before I knew that what it is like to be in a Reconstructionist community. I was a fan of Kaplan already. So anyway, he was born in Lithuania, came to the US as a young man together with his family. They came to the US in the late 19th century. As you know, in that era, over 2 million Eastern European Jews came to the US, which is a huge number. That is one of the biggest Jewish migrations ever in history, if not the biggest. And these 2 million Jews who arrived within 4 decades, basically, between 1880 and 1921 or 24, they drastically transformed Judaism in America. Suddenly they were the majority of the Jewish community, and that led to many challenges and conflicts within the Jewish community, but we'll discuss that later. The last point is that Reconstructionist Judaism renamed its central organization in 2018 to Reconstructing Judaism. You could see that in the video clip, that at the very end of the video clip, it didn't say Reconstructionist Judaism, it says Reconstructing Judaism. The movement made that decision in order to emphasize that we are constantly reconstructing. And this act of reconstructing is ongoing. This is not something that has been finalized. We are all part of that reconstructing of Judaism. So that's the idea behind the change of the name. But the name of the ideology has not been changed. So when we speak of Reconstructionist Judaism as an ideology, we still say Reconstructionist Judaism, and we don't say Reconstructing Judaism. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Okay, so let's move on and learn some history, unless there are any questions so far. Great. So the term Reconstructionist Judaism, or the reconstruction of Judaism, first was used by Kaplan in an article which was published in the Menorah Journal. Some of you might have heard of this journal already. It was one of the most important Jewish magazines of the early 20th century in the US, if not the most important one. So all the influential Jewish intellectuals, politicians, rabbis, theologians, scholars published their articles in this magazine, and Kaplan contributed with several articles. And a program for the reconstruction of Judaism was one of his most important contributions to this magazine. Now, the context for this the historical context for this article is that by the 1920s, there is increasing anti-Semitism in the US, and there is also a pressure to assimilate. You all have heard of the concept of a melting pot that says that all cultures, all religions have to melt together and form a new culture, which will be the American society. So that was a very common idea at the beginning of the 20th century. Many of the presidents, Woodrow Wilson, Theodore Roosevelt, signed up for that idea. But Jews were not that enthusiastic about the melting pot, because to them, especially to those Jews who were more traditional and more religiously observant, To them, the melting pot meant that they would assimilate, that they would lose their distinct Jewish identity. They were afraid that unless they give up on religious observances, they will be not accepted as part of the American society. And indeed, there were many Jews who gave up their Jewish identity, who gave up the ritual observances, and who chose the way of assimilation. So that is the historical context for this article, because Mordechai Kaplan actually wanted to stop assimilation, and he wanted to provide a way to be Jewish and modern. He wanted to reconstruct Judaism in a way that would be attractive to the Jewish immigrants and to Jews who were already born in the US, and in a way that they could keep their distinct Jewish identity, but also become American without giving up their Jewishness. So Kaplan believed that the existing two main movements in the US were not capable of stopping assimilation, because both these movements had their own challenges. So first, he said that any modern Jew who reads books in science or anthropology or historiography or philosophy, sociology, whatever, cannot follow a theology that is extremely traditional and believes, for example, in God as a personal God, or believes in revelation on Mount Sinai, etc., etc. All these traditional Jewish principles were for Kaplan not acceptable, because he believed that these theological claims are not compatible with being a modern Jew, with being a modern person in the 20th century. And that was his main critique against Orthodox Judaism. That's why he did not think that Orthodox Judaism could give an answer to all the challenges of his era. Even though he himself came from an Orthodox Jewish family, so his father was a rabbi in New York, an Orthodox rabbi, and he himself was ordained as an Orthodox rabbi. And he was working in Orthodox Jewish communities until the publication of this article. Until 1920, he was working in various Orthodox communities in New York, in Manhattan. But then in 1920, he left the community where he was serving. He also criticized the Reform movement. I find his critique of the Reform movement especially interesting, because very often people ask me, so what's the difference between Reform Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism? Like, as you probably know, on an institutional level, Reform Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism today are cooperating in many different settings. We are in the same international Zionist organization. We are in the same international umbrella organization known as World Union for Progressive Judaism. So on an institutional level, there is much cooperation between Reform Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism, especially today. But there are also theological differences, and I believe these differences are today less relevant, but there are still some differences, and there were core differences at the time of Kaplan in 1920. So the Reform movement in the late 19th century, in 1885, in the so-called Pittsburgh Platform, declared that Judaism is a religion. And Judaism is not an ethnicity, Judaism is not a nation. They rejected Judaism as a peoplehood. And for that reason, the Reform movement was also non-Zionistic or even anti-Zionistic, because they did not believe that Jews are a people. In their opinion, Jews were only a religion. And that was a concept which Kaplan opposed vehemently. To him, Judaism was a civilization. So it was more than just a religion. We will see his definition of civilization in a second. And he wanted to embrace other aspects of Judaism besides religion, because he believed that Judaism includes many other aspects of life. Judaism is the Hebrew language. Judaism is social activities, your connection to the Holy Land, or Judaism is your history, your shared fears. There are many other aspects to Judaism than just the religion itself. And that's why Kaplan was one of the most outspoken advocates at the beginning of the 20th century of the so-called Jewish Community Center movement. So today we have Jewish community centers all over the states, all over the world. But at the beginning of the century, that was still a new thing, and there were only a few JCCs. And Kaplan was one of the most important advocates of that movement. And he also created, or he was involved in the creation of new Jewish centers. The term shul with a pool is often accredited to him, even though he's not the person who said that, as far as I know. But that saying summarizes well that Kaplan believed that a Jewish house should be not only a house of prayer, but also a house of study, and most importantly, a house of community. And the last point of which I wanted to address, and which is also very important to Kaplan, is Zionism. So in the era of Kaplan, most American Jews were anti-Zionists or non-Zionists. The Reform movement rejected Zionism because they believed that Jews are not a people. If they're not a people, they should not have their own homeland. Makes sense. Orthodox Judaism rejected Zionism because they believed that an independent Jewish state should not be formed before the creation of before the Messiah arrives. And many other Jews just didn't care because they were feeling well and safe and secure in the US and didn't want to go anywhere else. But Kaplan believed that if there were an independent Jewish state in Palestine, that would foster a cultural exchange between Jews in Palestine and Jews in the diaspora, including Jews in the US. And that's why Kaplan considered himself to be a cultural Zionist. To him, having Jews living in Palestine was important for the future of Jewish civilization. He did not want to establish a Jewish state, to have a Jewish army and stuff like that. He wanted to have a Jewish state so the Jewish state can be in constant exchange with the Jewish diaspora, and that there is an exchange. And so for him, this was more about the cultural exchange than nationalism. Great. Does anyone have anything to add or any questions?
I was just thinking that our local JCC just celebrated their centennial, so they must have been very early on the scene.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but yeah, so as far as I know, the first JCCs were established in the 1910s, so they must have been one of the first ones, probably. And Kaplan, as I said before, Kaplan was not the first one to come up with the idea, but he was in the front line when it came to establishing new JCCs. Okay, so let's have a look at the term evolving civilization, because as you have already heard, evolving civilization is one of the core ideas of Reconstructionist Judaism. So I already explained what civilization means to Kaplan, that we have a shared identity, shared history, shared fears and hopes, etc. I don't think I have to say more about that. What might be more interesting is the part about evolution, about evolving. Now, the idea is that Judaism is not constant. So we are all part of this evolving civilization. Every generation defines itself and its behavior and belief for itself. There is historic evidence that Judaism and Jewish theology and Jewish law did not mean the same to the Jews who lived in the Second Temple period than to Jews who lived in the rabbinic era of the 1st or 2nd centuries after a common era. And the belief and behavior, etc., didn't mean the same to medieval Jews living in the Arabian Peninsula or living in the territory which we call today Poland. So the main idea of the term evolving civilization is that Judaism, Jewish behavior, Jewish law, Jewish ethics, Jewish identity keeps changing, and that it's the people themselves, it's us who define what it means to be a Jew and what Judaism means. And that, as I said before, changes from time to time, from space to space. And Kaplan believed that it's the community always which makes these decisions, which makes the changes instead of the individual. I believe that this might be also considered to be a difference between Reconstructionist Judaism and Reform Judaism. The latter is, of course, more individualistic, but Reconstructionist Judaism has been a branch that is heavily based on communal decision-making. We will speak about that later too. Then another aspect of evolving civilization is that it's not a transcendent being that, I mean, it's not God or not a deity that created the Jewish people or that created the Jewish community, but the Jewish people themselves. And now that is one of the parts of Kaplan's theology, which caused him the most trouble. Next month, we are going to speak about that in detail, but he was actually excommunicated at one point in the 1940s after a series of statements he made in public about the role of God in this civilizational approach. He was considered to be a heretic by the Orthodox Jewish community. Remember, he is from the Orthodox Jewish community, that's his background, so it does matter if they excommunicate him. I mean, maybe not for, I don't know if it matters for him personally. He probably knew that. I mean, he could have expected that for sure. But it does matter for us definitely that he was excommunicated for his views on the role of God and the role of the Messiah and other aspects which we are going to deal with next month. Since Judaism is constantly reconstructed by the generations for their own realities, for their own circumstances, there's this notion and bon mot in Reconstructionist Judaism that the past has a vote and not a veto. This is a saying which is often attributed to Kaplan, and as you might guess, it emphasizes again the aspect of evolving. Just because our ancestors did something, that doesn't mean that we have to do the same. Their reality was not the same reality as ours, and we have to reconstruct Judaism for ourselves, for our generation, reflecting our generation's realities. And a last point I wanted to address when it comes to the idea of evolving civilization is the notion that we are living not only in one civilization. So it's great that we have this Jewish civilization. It's great that we have the Jewish community, that we get to have this lecture on Zoom, and that yesterday we got together for Simchat Torah and a week ago for Yom Kippur. And that's great that we have this opportunity to get together regularly and to celebrate our Jewishness. But of course, we also live in a different world. All of us are involved in non-Jewish spaces. I assume that we are all involved in non-Jewish spaces too. I describe that as secular/Western civilization. that's something we can argue about how to describe that other civilization. But the point is that a modern Jew lives in two civilizations at least. Is that all clear? Do we have any questions or concerns or comments?
Hi. I do have a specific question. Of course, my hearing here is not fantastic, but is it that Kaplan did not believe in a personal God or a God that created human beings?
Yes, thanks for your question, Vilma. So that's correct. Kaplan did not believe in a personal God. Kaplan, he had a pretty naturalistic approach, and I would say that his belief in God could be even described as a belief in natural laws. But I also want to note that since the days of Kaplan and since he published his books on theology, which Steve is going to speak about in more detail in the third class. So since then, many Reconstructionist theologians actually developed more traditional approaches to God, which are less naturalistic and which depict God in different relations between human beings instead of ways which can be described as natural laws. Because Kaplan's approach, in my opinion, is very naturalistic, and yeah, so that actually bothered many in his age. And I believe that it bothered also many Reconstructionist Jews in the decades after Kaplan. But there will be a whole session. There will be a whole session dedicated.
I understand. So basically, he's kind of leaving it up to us as individuals to figure out how God fits into our lives.
More like for the communities, I would say.
More like the community. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
But sure. But this is a very important question. I'm glad you raised it. And you should definitely join the class in 2 months, because that's the whole class will be devoted to that one question.
Okay.
Great. So if you don't mind, I will move on. I already made a comment on Jewish law, on halakha, how to relate to halakha. And I also mentioned before that Kaplan himself came from an Orthodox Jewish background, or he had an Orthodox Jewish background, and he actually remained halakhically observant throughout his life. So even after he rejected the idea of revelation on Sinai, and even after he developed his idea of God as in a framework of naturalism and natural laws, etc., he did not cease to observe halakha. And he actually believed that halakha gives Judaism a meaning. I brought you here a quote from 1920. We accept the halakha, which is rooted in the Talmud, as the norm of Jewish life, availing ourselves at the same time of the method implicit therein to interpret and develop the body of Jewish law in accordance with the actual conditions and spiritual needs of modern life. So that's a quote by Kaplan from 1920. And so, as you can see here, even though he kept on observing religious law, kept on observing halakha, he emphasized that the halakhic observance has to be up to date, that it has to be in accordance with the conditions and spiritual needs of modern life. And I just, before I would take questions or reactions, I just wanted to read you another quote from a more current Reconstructionist approach. This quote is from Rabbi David Teutsch, who edited the guide known as A Guide to Jewish Practice. The book was published in 2011. It's a great resource. So if anyone is interested in Reconstructionist approaches to Jewish law or Jewish customs, I can really recommend this book, David Teutsch, A Guide to Jewish Practice. And he wrote the following. The Reconstructionist approach is post-halachic because we live in a post-halachic world, a world where Jewish law cannot be enforced. Obligation and spiritual discipline exist without the enforcement of a functioning legal system. Thus, we take halakha seriously as a source and resource that can shape expectations while not necessarily seeing ourselves as bound by inherited claims of obligation. Therefore, the practices advocated in this guide are not monolithic, and the voices of a lively group of commentators provide further insights, arguments, and alternative approaches that span the broad range of views advocated by Reconstructionist rabbis and scholars. The guide assumes that thoughtful individuals and committed communities can handle diversity and will of necessity reach their own conclusions. So you probably have already noticed that there is a difference here between what Kaplan wrote in 1920 and what Rabbi David Teutsch wrote in 2011. There's a difference how these two rabbis, how these two Reconstructionist leaders, David Teutsch is definitely one of the leading thinkers of Reconstructionist Judaism today, define the role of halakha, the role of law, Jewish law. As I read Teutsch, for him and for many other contemporary Reconstructionist rabbis, the halakha is more like an idea or something more abstract, like a guide. It's a guide to live a Jewish life, but it is not perceived as law. Yes, and what Teutsch also wrote at the very end, I think is also important, that it's the communities that have to make their own conclusions. Values-based decision-making is one of the most relevant Reconstructionist Jewish values, I believe, which again is connected to this, to the importance of communities, to the power of communities. It's the communities themselves which have to make the decisions on Jewish ritual observances, liturgy, etc., and not some 16th century legal document. And the method of values-based decision-making serves this purpose. Yeah, this is also a method which was described by David Teutsch. He published on this in more length, also in the Guide to Jewish Practice. He elaborates how values-based decision-making can be realized. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions on halakha? Again, this will be a separate unit in a few months, so this is just an introduction. Okay, so let's continue with the question of who is a Jew and what do Reconstructionist Jews think of intermarriage and stuff like that. So again, as I think it's probably clear by now that the community has a lot of power in Reconstructionist Judaism. So it's the community, the congregation, which defines whether they accept only Jews who are matrilineal descent, so Jews who are Jewish on their mother's side, as the halakha requires, or if they accept Jews who are Jewish only on their father's side, which is a non-halachic approach, but for the record, till the 1st century Common Era, Jews did recognize people of Jewish descent, people with a Jewish father as Jews. So again, I think that's a good example for the evolving Jewish civilization. But anyway, it's the congregation which makes the decision whether they accept people as Jews who are Jewish only on their father's side or not. And role of non-Jews in Reconstructionist congregations also changes between synagogues. Some synagogues allow them to become members, other synagogues allow them to become affiliated members, etc. So again, it's the community that has to make the decision, not the umbrella organization or any other group, not even the rabbi. The rabbi can make recommendations and can present some traditional texts, but at the end of the day, it's the community that is supposed to make the decision, that is supposed to make a Jewish values-based decision, and not someone else. Another interesting aspect to this community decision-making is when there is a conflict within the community, because obviously there are conflicts within Reconstructionist Judaism, just like in any other community. So as you might have heard, in 2015, the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College decided to accept rabbinical students who are in a relationship with non-Jews. And this decision led to a split, and some Reconstructionist rabbis formed a new Reconstructionist group that opposed this decision of RSC, and they also opposed other recent developments in reconstructing or Reconstructionist Judaism. So there is conflict within the movement too. Of course, why wouldn't be there any conflicts? And before I would finish, I just wanted to read you this manifest, which is on the website of Reconstructing Judaism. So Reconstructionists approach Judaism and life with deep reverence for the past and a passion to relate it to the present. In a rapidly changing world, Reconstructionist communities share and create new ways of being Jewish to connect us to the divine and ensure our lives are filled with purpose. We view Judaism as the evolving civilization of the Jewish people in an ongoing relationship with God. Our shared culture, rituals, traditions, and practices reflect over 3,000 years of that evolution, and we continue to share and shape it today. We break down the walls that divide us, demonstrating what it means to be Jewish today, standing up for justice and creating a better world for all. We experience and discover God through our daily acts of ritual, creative expression, and humanity, which leads to individual spiritual fulfillment. We have originated many of the core innovations within American Judaism and led efforts to make our community even more forward-thinking, inclusive, and relevant. We are committed to democratic practice in Jewish life and believe that people hold the right and obligation to reconstruct Judaism in order for it to remain relevant in our lives. if you have any comments or on this manifest, that would be much appreciated. I really want to know what you think of this.
I like the last line where it's you hold the right and the obligation to reconstruct Judaism for it to remain relevant.
Great. And do you want to tell us why you like that specifically?
Just because it's, as a civilization, we're all part of carrying it forward, and we all play a role, whatever it may be, but we have some obligation to carry it, shape it, move it forward.
Great, thank you. If there are no more questions, I have one more video clip, which tells us something about the future of Reconstructionist Judaism. We can watch that, and if you wish, we can stay a bit longer online and continue discussing. So Liz, I have to stop sharing now, right? And start sharing again because there is sound in the video clip. I can't hear you. You are muted.
Sorry. I think it may have kept it.
Oh.
If you clicked share sound the last time, it keeps it for the next one. So you might be good already.
So let's try it.
We're all trying to find
It worked? Great.
way through this life. Some people navigate these waters on their own. Some rely on a deeper sense of meaning to help guide the way. As Reconstructionist Jews, we have set a course toward justice and compassion through creative Jewish living and learning. But there are times when the winds change dramatically. Today, our society embraces individualism to an extreme degree. Fear and mistrust are too often the default reaction to people and ideas deemed different. There's uncertainty in the air, and the way forward is less clear. For many, it feels like our society has lost its moral compass. When it comes to shared values, it seems we're diverging rather than coming together. We feel an ever-increasing loss of community. Too often, we find meaning more in work rather than in human connection. Or we depend on technology and social media to fill a void. Can Judaism continue to help us find meaning and purpose in these challenging times? Or will people gradually drift away because their needs are no longer being met? These are anxious times, and yet we know we can emerge stronger. A Reconstructionist approach to Judaism is built on the strength of traditions from generations past. We use our history, texts, and teachings to nourish current and future generations, while acknowledging uncertainty and embracing our capacity for change. We're not afraid to confront what is no longer working in an idea or concept and rework it into something new. Challenging times are an opportunity to sharpen our thinking and open our hearts. No matter what the landscape looks like, Reconstructionist Jews adapt and act. We believe it's essential to feel part of an intentional community. A Reconstructionist approach emphasizes our need to learn from and connect with others in our Jewish communities and in the larger world around us. Our congregations create these opportunities for people to engage with one another and the wider world. Our rabbinical students do more than study together. They learn to connect with one another and the communities they help to grow. And we build summer camps to be expansive environments where Jewish youth experience how we can't be our best selves on our own. We welcome those who are marginalized. And in these times, more of us feel this way every day. A Reconstructionist approach gives us tools to find meaning and chart a path forward, whatever challenges we encounter. Our Jewish traditions guide us as we tackle moral issues. We challenge unjust paradigms, including speaking out against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. We recognize the face of God in every human, including immigrants and refugees. Our path forward may be constantly evolving. With open hearts and solid foundations, Reconstructionist Jews will continue to embrace the challenges of the future. Let's journey together.
So hope you liked that video clip too. Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for asking questions, for making comments. I really appreciated that. If there is anything else you want to say or discuss, now is the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was only on audio here, but it was a lot better than nothing. I was very grateful. I thought it was, as I start watching things in the car, I get sick. So this worked out really well.
Good.
Thank you so much. Glad to hear that.
Yesterday that you were going to talk about the first Reconstructionist prayer book and those two prayers and how they related. Is that going to get covered in next class, or?
That's correct. That's correct. I was thinking to include it today, but I didn't want to include too much. And also then I don't have to talk about many things next month if I tell you everything today.
Please leave them wanting more.
But I mean, if you are interested, I can tell you already that Sabbath prayer book, which Kaplan published in the 1940s, was the last drop in the glass, and he got excommunicated by the Orthodox rabbinate after the publication of that Siddur. And yesterday, during the Simchat Torah service, we read 2 prayers from that Siddur, which Kaplan wrote, or Kaplan and his associates wrote.
Oh,
I'm kind of curious about
why was it?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Why was that the last straw that made them excommunicate him? What was in that prayer book that did that?
So I think there were 2 main factors which affected that. First of all, he abandoned every single reference to Jewish chosenness. The whole idea of Jews being a Jewish people has concerned Kaplan for decades, even before the publication of the Siddur. So, but I think that was the point when he first actively changed liturgy to implement his critique on Jewish chosenness. He rejected the idea because he believed that it makes Jews think that they are superior, and that's why we should leave and abandon the notion of Jewish chosenness. So if you check out your Siddur, your Reconstructionist Siddur, you will see that, for example, the blessings for the Torah reading are different in a Reconstructionist Siddur than in a non-Reconstructionist Siddur, because in the non-Reconstructionist blessing it says, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. So blessed is the one who chose us from all the people and gave us the Torah. That's what the Reform Siddur says. That's what the Conservative Siddur says, what the Orthodox Siddur says. But the Reconstructionist Siddur doesn't say that. It says something different, which I actually don't know by heart because I never used it before coming to the US. But it is, what's the blessing for the Torah reading? Let me just check.
I'll find it. But is this where Yoshvei Tevel came in?
Yeah. Scott always
Yoshvei-
says that the Yoshvei Tevel is the one thing that makes us really different than other Jews. We pray for those who would want to hurt us as well, not just those who are on our side.
Yes, that's also true. But actually, Yoshvei Tevel has been added by other movements too. Like in many Reform Siddurim, you can also find that addition. And also in some conservative Siddurim, actually, you can find that addition. But there's this change in the Torah blessings, and I'm looking in the Siddur now.
Okay.
But
I found it. Is it in the part before the Torah is read, or the part
yes,
after?
before.
Yeah.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirvanu la'avadato, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Thank you. Can you read the translation too?
Blessed are you, Eternal One, our God, the sovereign of all worlds, who has drawn us to your service and has given us your Torah. Blessed are you, Eternal One, who gives the Torah.
Thank you. So you can see a difference there, for example. The traditional blessing would say that blessed are you, God, who chose us and gave us the Torah, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hami, who chose us from all the peoples. And this is, of course, not compatible with the rejection of Jewish chosenness. So that is one example of the ideas which Kaplan implemented in his Siddur and which were problematic in the eyes of the rabbis. The other idea was that Kaplan abandoned all references to the Messianic age. Like he did not believe that the Messiah will come as a person and suddenly everything will be better. And again, that is a traditional tenet of Orthodox Judaism. So that was also condemned by the Orthodox rabbis. And to be fair, Kaplan was not the first one to claim that we should not wait for a personal Messiah. Reformed Jewish theologians had claimed that before him, but they were Reformed Jews, and the Orthodox rabbinate didn't care about the Reformed Jews. They cared about Kaplan because he was one of them, or he used to be one of them, and that's why they excommunicated Kaplan. But they did not excommunicate all the Reformed Jews. They didn't care about them.
Okay.
Can we talk a little bit about what makes someone Jewish?
Sure. What do you think, Rachel? What makes someone Jewish?
Well, so I have a very specific view on that. But I don't know. I want to hear what other people think, because for a lot of people, I'm not Jewish.
You and I both fall into that gray area.
I fall into the gray area. My father was Jewish. My mother was not Jewish when I was born. She has since converted and
But only to reform.
But in a reformed community and no mikveh. And so like I've had conversations with conservative rabbis where they say, well, you're not Jewish enough to be buried in our graveyard in the Jewish section. And so that conversation happens in a lot of different places. At the same point that I don't look Jewish enough to like warrant being bugged by a white supremacist or something like that, I am Jewish enough to, be disliked by them in other ways. And then, I'm Jewish enough for some congregations and I'm not Jewish enough for other congregations and all sorts of fun stuff. So it gets interesting. It becomes a conversation.
Yeah, I found it very interesting that Rabbi, I forget his name, at Brit Shalom, the past rabbi.
Judah.
Judah said you could go into the mikveh and then that they consider you Jewish.
Yeah.
So.
But part of me really wants to tell them to shove it, because in that same sense, if the only difference between me being Jewish enough to be basically one of the lay leaders of our congregation and not being Jewish enough to be buried in the Jewish portion of a cemetery, if the only difference is some running water, I really
but you're talking about a conservative synagogue, so right. Actually, yeah.
But I kind of take that offensively, because my actions should speak louder than
a bath.
Yeah. And Mom kind of feels the same. So
which is why we haven't done it all these years, but why
right. I'm
considering gathering all the girls who are not considered Jewish and all going to the mikveh just because I think we would like it. And I've always rejected it because somebody told me I had to. Yeah. That's why I left Catholicism, because somebody was telling me I had to do something. And I don't take to that very well.
I fall into that same gray area, as my mother was adopted by Jews but did not have a bat mitzvah and was never fully educated and everything. But so even though there were some traditions I was raised with and things like that, she was Jewish when I was born, but they can't prove she had a mikvah when she was a baby.
Mm,
So she may not have fully been counted in
Baby?
yeah.
as in when she was adopted.
Yeah,
I
we
think
don't
that's the
know whether
process.
she
You
was
adopt a
mikvah-
child, you dip them in the mikvah, and then they're Jewish, I believe.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
sometimes
Over a
they
few
have
steps, I'm
Beit
sure.
Din. Sometimes they actually have a Beit Din for the baby too. I know Emma Levy Smith had a Beit Din.
Okay.
What they do?
They actually had a Beit Din for Emma.
At what age?
She was an infant when they adopted her. It was the same Beit Din that adopted did David's conversion.
Okay.
What? Well, I don't understand what they do. What do they do?
They judge you, I believe.
Yeah, they judge the adoption, I guess, and then they take the baby to the mikveh.
Oh.
And that's kind of I really think Rabbi Judah was horrified that I wasn't Jewish, considering how many conversations he and I had had, and his assumption that I had been, because of the conversations that we had had and the way I lead my life. He was shocked that I wasn't Jewish in his eyes after that conversation. Like, it was almost like I came out to him as a lesbian or something like that. It was so drastic to him that he was shocked.
Well, Rabbi Malkabina kept on talking about getting us all to go to the mikvah. I've never been to a mikvah.
Well, if we ever
I'm
decide
Jewish,
we're going to
but,
do it, we'll take you.
I've never been to a mikveh, and I was raised conservative. I was married conservative. I'm still in Judaism married, I suppose, because I never got a get.
Mhm.
But I'd love to go to a mikveh at some point. So if you guys go, count me in.
Well, it's generally done all women, and it's, well, no, it's definitely done all women. It's generally done as a group, is what I was trying to say. Mom
yeah,
and
it's
I,
all women. Now,
there's one that's
I think you take your clothes off. I have no idea. I've never been.
but yeah, you do
So.
take your clothes off. But there's one in Philadelphia that is supposedly very welcoming to folks who are not Orthodox. The one in Allentown is very Orthodox specific, which is the other reason why Mom and I have never gone, is because we didn't want to go to the one here.
And
I don't know. There are other groups in town that have gone to the one here. So I'm not sure how it all works. And now with COVID, I doubt anybody's going anywhere. I really doubt it. So,
Rabbi, do you know the answer to that one with COVID?
I might have an answer, even though I will not go with you to the mikveh. But speaking from a point of view of Jewish tradition, any river counts as a mikveh. You don't need a rabbinate and some authorities who supervise a room which is filled with natural water. You can use any river, and that counts as a mikveh.
And it has to be like just naturally flowing. So even if you do it in a building, you have to plumb it a certain way.
That's correct.
When Jane and I were looking at this last, I remember that.
And the other thing is that that isn't that where like the baptism in rivers came from, Rabbi?
I am not sure, but that sounds like a reasonable explanation. So
we joke with my one daughter, who is the most most atheist of the
anti-establishment.
Yeah, anti-establishment. Let's go with that. She is super anti-establishment. My daughter Emily is like the most radical feminist, like LGBT pro LGBT, like very, very, very. She's
A walking opinion.
She is a walking opinion. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
She at Tashlich one year threw herself into the river as my biggest sin. And we started teasing her that she is now the only one of us females who is now Jewish because she went into the mikveh.
Emily's neat. That's all I have to say. Emily's neat. She really is a neat.
Right.
She is very neat, but that was a great moment.
Home. That doesn't mean I feed you immediately.
Thank you, Wilma. I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one that yells at my dog.
No, this is a cat who's all of a sudden meowing on the top of his lungs because, he has me wrapped around his little paw and usually comes and asks me to give him things like turkey breast, So I usually do that, but I just walked in the house and ate a little something, so, it's not top priority.
Oh, look at that Fluffy. Look at
That
that.
is Sebastian, who was supposed to have lost weight after his last vet visit and instead has managed to gain 2 pounds. His diet's not working.
Pandemic hits us all.
We went to a dog diet.
I forgot my computer at the shore, but luckily one of my good friends is down there who lives about an hour from here, and she's going to take it to her house, and I'll pick it up there. I'm telling you, I think I need a new brain. Oh, well.
I think we all do. It's called COVID. Goodness gracious.
At any rate, I will join you guys for the next thing, whatever that is. And I am going to leave you guys. I've never done this before on the phone, but it actually worked out just fine.
Great.
Great. We're glad you were able to join